Want to achieve network marketing success? Then join the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant John Solleder. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, hey, everybody, this is going to be a really fun interview. It's always good to interview your friends. I interview a lot of people that I get to know over these things. But this gentleman I've known for a number of years had a real big impact on my son's not only athletic career, but academic career. And also my career. Has become a good friend, even though we've never met physically. One of these days, I'm going to go up to Nova Scotia and we're actually going to get a chance to really break bread. But Bob and I've known each other now for a lot of years. We talk off camera a lot, but today we're going to talk on camera about his beautiful new book, Mind versus Sales by Bob Palmer. Easy name to remember. Okay. Available on Amazon, of course. Where else? And Bob, brag on yourself a little bit. Tell people what you do.
I'm a high performance trainer. And I've developed a particular systems approach to high performance. And way back when I was in the martial arts, I floundered around and was looking for something beyond what was out there, which was typically psychology, and which didn't work for me. So I had to find things that did work, and I found a systems approach and added my pieces to it and made it a complete system that took me to my black belt, took me to winning competitions, and it was pretty fun time, pretty fun ride. It was the kind of zone that you learn and you don't want it to end. And that evolved into a business and working with athletes, and turned out some pretty successful professionals, 4-time Olympic gold medalist, other Olympians and medalists, and it just what started to happen was these athletes would send me people they wanted me to work with. I mean, business people, or they'd send me executive athletes, or people that were struggling with PTSD or whatever. And every time I applied to the system, it worked. And so the whole process started turning into one of working with executive athletes, and they turned it into working with them as executives, which turned into business and sales. And it's been a fun ride, and that's a 30-year fun ride for me.
Well, I know Bob has worked with my team at my network marketing company with some of my English-speaking leaders, both in Canada and the U.S. and then over the U.K. too. We had some U.K. people that have worked with Bob, and as I said, my son worked with him early on. That's how we originally met during Fred's hockey life, and segued to his academic life. And he's used a lot of what Bob's taught him academically the last couple of years to go from really being I hate to say this as a father, but not a great student, to now all of a sudden having his act together. I mean, the focus that he's got now, studying electrical engineering and the mathematics that come with it, which, he showed me the other day, and I just went, I have no idea. Fortunately, I have a very good friend in New Jersey who's a math professor. So worst comes to worst, we call Dr. Bob, another Bob, Dr. Bob, the math Bob. But anyway, so Bob, let's talk a little bit about this book, because I got it the other day. Your wife was nice enough to send it down to me. I wrote the foreword to this book, by the way. That's how strongly I feel about Bob's work. I don't just write forwards for people. I get asked all the time, and I only do it for select people that I feel really have a message. I'm not just trying to, sell something. So Bob, I know, has great messages. So let's start with one of them. Let's talk about the 6 steps to success.
Yes, it's I've read a lot about high performance or people who profess to have programs for high performance, and it was all topical, right? This is how you set your goals. This is how you use certain strategies to breathe, and it was nothing cohesive. And so what I did was I set about to find a system or else it sort of fell into my lap, this system of high performance. So it's the way we think. And so the 6 steps are what set you up in the book, just like perhaps like a clinic that allows you to walk through the book and create your own high performance from step to step to step to step. And I say in the book, I have a little stop sign. Don't go any further until you got this step, because you're building a foundation. You're building what one person calls a cathedral, right? You have to have that base. If you don't have the base, it's going to crumble. So the first step is learning the zone, learning what that is, and it's not airy fairy, it's not a myth. It's really it's your high performance, and everybody's had them, whether you're in sales or business or in sport. You've had those moments of brilliance. In my book, in that first step, I describe what that is, and then how you replicate it. Right? You can replicate it over and over and over with the right system.
So let's talk a little bit about the zone, because you just referenced it. And you and I love to talk about the zone when we're together, but give a description of it in a business sense.
Well, let's look at the negative side first. And in sales, there's a lot of stress or personal stress on individuals. They have to meet certain targets, certain goals. There's a lot of associated self-medication with sales. There's lots of, I think just overall stress. But every once in a while, you have that conversation with a client or a prospect, and it just goes like this. It's just amazing. You make this deal, and you afterwards you went, well, that was easy. I wish they were all like that. So that is what I would call a moment of brilliance. It just was effortless. So the idea in that step 1 is, if that's your zone, many approaches say, well, no, it's just luck, right? Or you have to be skillful to get it. But no, it has a certain feel to it. And so in my book, I show you how to re-engineer that every time, not just once in a while, once in a blue moon, as they say, but every single time you go into a meeting. If you don't have it, then expect failure or expect not the best results. So you learn how to get into that, and you learn how to ultimately, with the remaining steps, is how do you sustain that? How do you live in it? And not only, and I'll say this right now, I'm probably saying it a few times, is you can't contain that zone. It's not just something you contain. No, I'm going to do it for sales today, and then I'm going to drop it, and the rest of my life I'm just going to go and be a bum. It is something you take everywhere. People will notice. They notice in sales. They buy from you more readily. You take it home to your spouse, to your kids. You're a volunteer in the community. Take it to your volunteer activities. It goes with you everywhere you go. It's portable.
What I love about what you're talking about from a sales standpoint, because we could talk about it sports all day, and maybe that makes more sense. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Detroit Lions right now, they're in the zone, right? Okay, we're recording this in December of 2024. Both those teams certainly look like they probably going to meet in the Super Bowl. Who knows, right? But let's take it back to business. When I was a youngster back in the 80s, I had started network marketing. My network marketing company had some challenges. I went into the life insurance business with a major New York company. And I did really, really well the first year. So well that in the second year, they said, we want you to go to a different office. And they put me in with 2 of the top producers. Matter of fact, the top producer at that particular company was in that office. He was an Iranian gentleman, probably at that point about the age I am now. Seemed like he was 100. About what I am now, in his 60s. And another gentleman who actually was my third cousin, believe it or not, which we didn't know at the time. But anyway, it's a story in itself for another day. But anyway, I got in with these 2 guys. They were both older, both super successful guys, both really good guys. But they were in the zone. They were guys that, you got to the office at 6 a.m., you were late. They had already written their first policy at breakfast. And you were thinking like, well, how do these guys do that? And they were always in that proverbial zone. And what that company tried to do was say, okay, here's kind of our young superstar, me. Let's put him over with these 2 older superstars that are in the zone. So that hopefully he'll continue. Now, I didn't continue in that particular business. I went back to network marketing. Obviously, the rest is history. But I think about that when I was reading a book the other day. And I said, somebody really smart, high up in that particular company said, let's put the guys in the zone together because they'll produce more business. Now, how do we do that as an individual? How do we do that as a team? If I'm in a team sport, let's say insurance, real estate, something where I'm in an office and we don't want people hanging out by the water cooler talking about the game last night, maybe for a minute or two, but we want them working, we want them selling, we want them achieving. So let's talk about as an individual first, Bob, and then as a team, how we get that zone mentality going in teamwork.
Well, the first part is that you have to understand how we learn. And once you understand how we learn, then that's where you can answer that first question. When we immerse ourselves with, as they did with you in that office with two senior salespeople, there's something called mirror neurons that we have that they're learning neurons. They're copycat. They're kind of monkey see, monkey do neurons that you know it's almost like osmosis. It really isn't. It's a process of the brain that just copies what's going on around you, and it can be hit and miss. And if you're not in an office with other successful people, then you may be copying the wrong thing. But the idea in the book, I give you the strategies with which to do that, with which to identify who your role model is, or who you want your role model to be, and step in their shoes and take on that. And it's when you experience that, it has an amazing result on your the way you respond to clients. And sometimes it seems amazingly automatic, but it is a process. So that's how you learn and how you grow, and perhaps how you put the blinders on to block off some of the negative people in your office, or negative people you have to deal with, or shed some of that negativity where you deal with a client who's negative and you walk away feeling like crap. You just feel bad. Why is that? Well, you've taken on some of their negativity as almost like putting on a ill-fitting cloak. So that's the part where we can learn ourselves very, very quickly. In a leadership context and creating your team, you become that linchpin, right? If you're the leader of the team, your zone is it's much admired, but it's through that same osmosis, that mirror neuron osmosis. They're copying you all the time. And if you walk into the office and you're out of the zone, guess how they're performing? That's pretty obvious, right? You walk into the office, you're in that zone. You don't have to open your mouth. They can see it. They can feel it. And as you mingle, even by the water cooler, as you say, you're having an uplifting effect on people. And that is how you create a team. That's how they create any team. The top, getting into sports, the top sports teams have leaders, owners that are in that zone that attract attention to themselves from that zone point of view. And it's not a trickle down, it's a gush down.
True.
And I can pretty much, I can look at anybody in a sales team, and if they're in the zone, I know the boss is. It's all works. And it's not bottom up, it's just top down.
There's an expectancy. And I think because I was reflecting on that the other day, I read the book Sunday afternoon. I skipped the NFL games on Sunday afternoon to read your book. Okay. Now, you know how big a deal that is for me, because I do love football. But at the end of the day, I was like, it's more important, and I'm not going to learn anything. I can watch these games in 20 minutes and record them, and which is what I did. I read your book instead. I made a lot of notes. And I was thinking about that again. When I walked in that office at 6 a.m., what had happened, just for everybody's information, okay? I had my father was a union electrician. He had a guy on his job who was a mechanical contractor who was interested in buying life insurance. So my father said to him, "We'll get a hold of my son." He gave him my phone number, and the guy called me and he said, "Hey, yeah, I'd like to meet with you." I said, "Well, when would you like to meet?" He said, "Well, I eat breakfast at 4:30 a.m." Okay. No problem. So we agreed to meet at a diner. This is in New Jersey. So New Jersey's got a diner on every other corner. So we met at a diner in Westwood, New Jersey. And anyway, we had breakfast. I bought him breakfast. And by about 5:30, we had finalized everything. He was off to work, and I had my first policy of the day. And I made a couple $1,000s, by the way. This is, this is like 1985. So that was a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, but it was a lot more money then. And I remember I was like proud as a peacock, Bob. I got in my car and I'm driving to the office. I'm thinking, I'm going to have the first stop in of the day. I get there and here's 𝐕𝐈𝐃𝐄, the top guy at MetLife. That's a real name, by the way. Okay, Mr. Mady, we used to call him. He's Persian. His mother, ironically, became my mother's, or his son rather, became my mother's orthopedic surgeon down the road. Kind of funny story in itself. And this other guy, Tom McGarrell. And Tom and Mady, they were ready at work at 6 a.m. I'm like, I don't know this because I've never been at the office at 6 a.m. I don't know that these guys, this is like a normal day for them. They see somebody 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, assuming somebody wants to see them, they see them at that time of day. This is normal for these top producers. And I found out real quick that the top producers get up early. And they get to work early and they get business early. They don't wait till 5 o'clock in the afternoon to go, "Hey, am I going to make any money today?" By 9 o'clock in the morning, they got that first sale done, or they're at least working on it. And I learned a really valuable lesson. And I think it goes back to the zone. Mr. Mady and Tom were always in the zone. I was not in the zone yet. I thought I was when they moved me to that office. What the company wanted was for me to get in that zone and eventually become a top producer like those two gentlemen were. And I didn't choose to do that. I actually left the industry a year later and got into network marketing. But the point I'll make, Bob, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is that was such a good life lesson for yours truly to see how the top sales producers were in that zone and never got out of that zone because they were afraid to get out of that zone. If they got out of that zone, hey, if all of a sudden they slept in till 8 o'clock in the morning.
Ooh, yeah.
Exactly. And then I found out in talking to both of them that this was modus operandi. They were up at 4:30 in the morning and they normally were trying to meet somebody like the gentleman I met who were in construction or in some type of business that they were either commuting to New York City in for where we were living at the time, or they were in, they were blue collar type of work that starts early in the morning. I learned a great lesson from those guys about the zone. And once again, how do people gain that zone? Like we say in hockey, right? How do they gain the zone, right? How do they gain that zone? And more importantly, stay there. What are some of the tools they can use, they can learn in this book?
Well, I mean, you mentioned these gentlemen as role models. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to go out and just do some cold calling with a gentleman who was just the epitome of a salesperson. I mean, we walked into, I think we spent the whole day just walking into businesses, and it was masterful. I mean, watching a professional work the front office staff and make his way through to the CEO every time. I mean, there were no exceptions to it. And I'm watching this, marveling at it, and I learned so much from that. I mean, initially I was just a little bit, maybe even off-put a little embarrassed by how forward he was and how quickly he made rapport with people. But after a while, I said, man, and this is really how you do it. He made most of his business with cold calls, where most people today, they avoid it. They send an email and they don't pick up the phone and try to call somebody and not talk to them personally or find their way in to speak with the decision makers. And they don't get a response back from an email because that person gets a gazillion emails and doesn't respond to emails. And they go, "I've failed." It's just, I'm not even a big fan of social media in a sense, even though we're using social media. But you really, if you're not willing to pick up the phone and learn how to build rapport with someone on the phone and make inroads that way, it's probably you're not going to have much success as a salesperson unless you're in a company and they just dump leads onto your lap. So I mean, that's one strategy. Just get out there and find a mentor, find a role model, and shadow them for a day. It's just it's you can't learn any faster when you do it that way, right? That's one of the best ways. Um, and in my book, I have a number of other strategies that work similarly or help you to resolve some of the blocks you might have to meeting people, or to, like you say, get up early. If you're having a hard time, dragging yourself out of bed in the morning, you got a problem in any business that you're in. And how do you resolve that? How do you deal with the stuff that happened the previous day or what you have to face? These are all limits to your zone. And so the idea with the system I've developed is that you have that outcome that you want to get to. But if you're not just so passionate about it, it's not going to happen. You can you can visualize and make it big and bright and attractive, but that helps. But there are going to be things that block you, that stop you. And so in many ways, this isn't really a sales book as so much as a high performance sales book.
So let's talk about that, because you made so many brilliant points, which is why people need to buy this book. I didn't even ask what the book costs. What's the book cost? I don't even know.
It's on Amazon, I think, for $24.99 or something like that, right?
Folks, if you're in sales and you're listening to this, and if you're listening to my show, you're in sales, whether you're in network marketing, whether you're in insurance, whether you're in you're in sales. At the end of the day, if you don't at least sell one person because what you learned from this book, Bob will give you money back.
Yeah, definitely.
Because here's why. Because let's talk about repeating deja vu, because deja vu is when we're in the zone. Because if you're listening to this show, you've been in the zone at some point. Nobody says no. Everybody you talk to about your network marketing business says yes. I'm either a buyer or recruit me into the business. If you're selling one of the other products that we mentioned, if you're selling automobiles, everybody that walks in your dealership says yes that day. We've all had those days, but then we've had those other days where you can't give it away. You could stand on the corner and go, hey, I'm sponsoring people today for free. Please join my company. They walk past you, right? We've had those days too. So Bob talks about deja vu. How do we repeat deja vu so we have more of those days that we love, where everybody seems like they're saying yes and they're lining up and saying, take my money. I want to join you, or I want to buy from you. How do we have more of those days, Bob?
I mean, one of the things that the executives and leaders I work with and the salespeople I work with find is that people become attracted to them when they know how to do that, when they know how to get into the zone and they know how to build rapport with individuals. They become the central point of any interaction. They can walk into any room and be a presence. I mean, this is more of a personal thing, but many of the individuals I work with, one of the first things they find out is that when they go home and if they have children, all of a sudden, the children are attracted to them, right? Their kids, usually their kids just see them coming in the house and they scatter. Oh, no, dad's home, or mom's home, or, they grumpy or whatever. Everything changes because you now learn how to step back. In one of the strategies, step back and actually see relationships for what they are. And that isn't enough. You got to make some changes. And those changes can be brilliant. And if you can do that at home with your kids, and you can do that in business with your clients, if you're the manager of the sales department, you need to be doing that with every salesperson in your organization. And when you can do that, and you become the leader, and all these mirror neurons are attracting them to you, and they want a piece of this action. And they want a piece of your success because they can feel it. There's no way you're going to learn in that, and no way you're going to lose in that situation.
Page 28, you talk about moments of brilliance. And you just mentioned the word brilliant. And we all think as salespeople, when we're in the zone, that we're brilliant. And that's why everybody wants to buy from us. But it probably means that we're being a beacon to people. We're being friendly. We're being open. We're saying, hey, I'm open for business, right? And all the other good intangibles that another human being looks at us and says, I want to do business with that guy. How do we get more moments of brilliance?
Well, in terms of the reverse engineering piece of the book, we've all had those, like you say, we've had those moments of brilliance. And it's sometimes it's just a matter of exploring them and looking at them and going, okay, there are 3 or 4 times over here when I was working with this type of client, I was very successful. Well, let's analyze that. What really happened there? And I'm not talking about analyzing the process you went through and whether the company process, is systematized enough or not. I'm talking about internally. When you have a wonderful experience, you feel really good. I mean, you do. I mean, it's kind of all over your body. But in the book, I show you how to zero in on where that is. And if you can zero in on that, and you notice that, oh, I feel that every time I have a success, all right. And if you haven't had many sales successes, maybe you need to go back to sports when you had successes, or if you have some family successes, or one guy I was working with didn't have a lot of successes, but he was a master craftsman of violins. And they were being played all around the world. And he thought about that and he just glowed. I said, man, there's your zone. How's that feel? Fantastic. So, but the neat thing about the whole reverse engineering process, and most people don't know this, but when you do that, and you actually get the feeling, forget the memories, but just get that feeling, that sets you up for a fabulous day of sales or whatever you're doing, because it takes your physiology to where you need to be. Your posture's there, your thinking processes are clear. You know exactly what you have to do.
And how important is self-talk in that process?
When you're in that process, there's no self-talk. Okay. So we have this notion that, okay, so negative self-talk where we beat ourselves up. Okay, that's not appropriate. That's kind of continuing the abuse maybe someone else laid it on you when you were a kid. But then the reverse of that, we think, okay, well, negative isn't good, positive must be good. But if you're positive self-talking yourself through a sale, you're thinking. There's no fluidity. There's no zone there. It's almost like, okay, you can be good here, Bob. There's, you can do this. You can do this. You can be, you can have your plaque on the wall. Gone. Oh, you didn't look like you're interested in me. So when you get to that zone, there is nothing but clarity in whatever you're doing. And we're talking about that high performance sale. And not only does it feels good, and not only does it lead your client to feel good, which adds to the possibility of success, but it also allows you to go through your product in a way that is exemplary and builds the trust and the confidence in what you're doing.
One of the words that comes to mind in what you're saying too is in every business that's a sales related business that I've ever been in 42 years, there's a referral process. If somebody feels good about you and you say, hey, Bob, you got a couple of friends you think might be interested in my product or service. They feel good about you. They go, yeah. Let me go, these days, let me go grab my phone. Hey, call my sister, call my cousin, call my neighbor down the street. He's a buddy of mine. We play golf together. Call these 3 people and maybe they'll buy, right? Maybe they'll sign up. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll buy your service. Maybe they won't. But at the end of the day, that person feels like, hey, I like doing business with Bob. So you know what? Jim and Joe and Mary, they'll probably like to do business with Bob too. I'm comfortable giving their names and their phone numbers and say, yeah, use my name. Tell them I told you to call them. you know? And that's a lost art, by the way, in sales today. People don't know, young people do not know they're supposed to ask for referrals. You're always supposed to ask for referrals, dude. Always ask, who else can benefit from my product or my service? Love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, my thoughts are, early on, I wasn't asking for referrals, and my business partner said, kind of kicked me in the shins and said, "Hey, Bob, every time you ask for referrals on this," and so I got in a real habit of doing it. But as I started building my business and started building the trust with my clients, I started noticing that almost 99% of my clientele now are referrals.
Hmm.
I've been in the business a long time, so I've built up a lot of trust. I've built up a lot of
Sure.
friendships with different coaches and clients and business people, and it's just it just starts to happen now when you do that.
So let's talk about some of the quotes that you used in the book of other people. So Bobby Jones, not everybody knows who Bobby Jones was. He was a great golfer. I want to say turn of the century. It was somewhere in that vicinity, early 1900s, I believe, right?
Yeah.
But Bobby Jones has a great comment. He says, "I never learned anything from a match that I won."
This is a part of the book that it's a full step in my book. It's a third step. And the third step in the book is really about learning to use our inner GPS, if you will. We all have GPS now on our vehicles, or they're on our cell phones, and at one point in our lives, that GPS has done us wrong, or somehow we ignored it, and what do we get? Do a U-turn, do a U-turn, next available U-turn. Oh, you missed that one, do the next one, right? It goes into this, fix it. It'll get us to our destination, fix it. We have that inside us as well. We have this wonderful GPS that tells us we start feeling anxious. What's it telling us? We screw up in a sales meeting. What's it telling us? We should be looking at that as to what it's telling us. Instead, we're getting miffed. We're throwing things. We're going home and we're screaming at the kids, or and we're missing it. So what he's referring to in that quote, what Bobby Jones is referring to, is the fact that every time stuff happens, it's important stuff. And there's a whole book written on don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Right? I'm of a different mind. I want you to sweat the small stuff, because the small stuff is often, especially if you're dealing with high performance, it's often big stuff. I had plenty of stories of little things that I thought were little, and I dealt with them, and man, the whole world opened up after I dealt with them. So sweat the small stuff, and especially sweat what you think is the big stuff, because that's gonna you're gonna get the greatest benefits from that. You're gonna your sales game is just gonna go way beyond where you think it is capable of. I get lots of individuals, saying to me, "Well, Bob, I really don't want to move on from this until I get this perfect." So, I don't want to go too fast through your program, because I want to get it perfect. And I tell them, I say, you have no concept what perfect is, right? You learn the zone. You get that, that moment of brilliance and translate it into your regular day-to-day operation. You have no idea what you're capable of.
Exactly. I think about that from a financial standpoint. When I was in college 100 years ago, or what to my kids seemed like 100 years, not early 1980s, by the way, folks, not that old. But I remember one night that I was working for a contractor through my father. My father got me the job, and I was working in the summertime. And I was working for this contractor, electrical contractor, and he was a little older than me, a couple years older than me. And his grandfather was a legend in the electrical business in New Jersey. And he said to me, he said, "Hey, you want to come home with me tomorrow night? My wife will make dinner, and then we'll go over and meet my grandfather." I said, "Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Why not?" But his grandfather knew my grandfather, who was dead before I was born, by the way. Okay. I mean, this is how far back
Yeah.
we're going. Okay. So 1950s and so. So anyway, he brings me home. His name is Ernie, the kid. It turns out his grandfather was also named Ernie. He was Ernie the third name. His father was second. Grandpa was first. He was third. So he takes me over. We eat dinner. Beautiful Italian meal his wife made, cappuccino, the whole 9 yards, right? Dude. New Jersey Italians, they know how to cook. And anyway, so he says, "Look, come see my grandpa." I said, "Okay, great." So we're down the street, a couple of houses. We go to this back lot, and here's all the trucks that came in that day off the jobs. And Ernie the first, who was probably 80 years old. Now, keep in mind, he owned a bank in Hoboken, New Jersey. Frank Sinatra's hometown, by the way. Knew Frank Sinatra, by the way. Anyway, owned a bank, owned this big electrical company, right? 50, 60, 70 trucks. Okay. And he's in there, and I swear to God, Bob, he's in there taking boxes with coffee cans, and he's taking wire nuts and the caps that they put at the end of wires, those little things they screw on
Yep.
for safety, and nuts and bolts, and he's separating them into the coffee cans. And we get talking a little bit, and I introduced myself. He said, "Yeah, I know your grandfather, I know your father, I know your uncles, blah, 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 blah." I said, "Oh, great." So we chat for a minute. I said, what are you doing? Now, I'm in business school, by the way. I'm going to a great university to get a degree in business. He says, "Son, if you take care of the pennies, the dollars will come." And it's like, what the heck is this old man talking about? I'm like, "Oh, okay, thank you very much." Well, it's kind of what we're talking about. Sweat the small stuff. When he came over from Italy and he built that business himself as the first employee to this now at that time major company in the electrical business, plus the bank that he owned, plus probably owned other businesses I wasn't even aware of there. But he worried about those things when he was this broke little Italian guy, basically building his company from scratch with blood, sweat, and tears that manifested itself all these years later to very successful. This guy could have afforded to be at the best restaurant in that town, having the best meal. But he's in there separating his stuff because, to your point, he's sweating the small stuff. He's saying, "Well, the guys at a job, they don't care. This isn't their nickels and dimes, but it's my nickels and dimes."
Yeah.
And it's a great metaphor that you use there of the small stuff. Why didn't they buy from me today? What did I say wrong? What did I do wrong? Did I park my car in front of like I coach insurance people sometimes. I tell them, do not park in front of somebody's mailbox because the mailman can't put the mail in. Person looks out the window, goes, "You're blocking my mail. Why would I buy from you? You're not even smart enough to not block my mailbox. Why would I buy anything from you? Why would I trust you with my money?"
Yeah.
Love your thoughts on stuff like that.
Well, one of my my business clients, he's also a clay target shooter, and but he was at a competition, and I got a note from him, and he said, "It's so much fun driving home from competitions these days." And I thought, great, I've been good, I've been effective, I've helped him. I helped him in his business, I've helped him in his competitive game. And then we got together in a meeting, and I said, "So you shot well?" And he said, "No. Why did you think I meant I performed well?" Well, it was your message. He said, "No, what I meant was I now have the tools to fix what I screwed up in my competition." And I went, "That's even better." Because I could just now imagine him on the drive home going, "Okay, I screwed up there, there, and there. How do I fix that? Yeah, okay, I can use this, Bob. How would Bob fix that? Oh, I see how I can do that." And the same thing now applies to sales, right? You're driving home from that failed meeting. In the past, you might have stopped off at the pub and downed a couple because you're just so mad at yourself. But now you have the opportunity with this set of strategies that I teach in Mind versus Sales to kind of step back and go, "Oh, That's where I lost it right there. I didn't even see that. Just that. And now even the small stuff or your mistakes become much more vivid and much more exciting. I mean, someone's going to say, how can you get excited about that? You screwed up in the sale. And you go, that'll never happen again.
Mm. Exactly. Exactly. You and I've talked about this before. Fran Tarkenton wrote a book on that. And I forget exactly what the title is. I read it so many years ago, but we had this discussion many years ago, you and I, about, I think it was something like what failure taught him, losing 4 Super Bowls. People say, oh, because they'd come up to, oh, you've lost 4 Super Bowls. He said, I also made 4 Super Bowls. Not pretty short list of guys that can say that, right? That's sort of as a starting quarterback. But his point was the same as you're making. One of those failures teach him that he ultimately carried on the 80 plus businesses that he's owned and started, many of which have become incredibly successful, right? It's not, hey, I walked in, they bought, I made money, great, aren't I great and wonderful? It's to your point. It's when I walk in and I go, hey, I did everything right and I didn't buy. Did my deodorant fail? Did I not shave today? Did I not comb I don't have hair to comb anymore, but did I not comb my hair? Did I park in front of their mailbox? Believe it or not, this sounds kind of redundant about the mailbox, but you would be amazed how many people lose sales because somebody looks out the window and says, why would I trust this person with my money on anything, whatever I'm buying from them? When they don't have enough sense to go, they don't know when my mailman comes or doesn't come. They're blocking my mailbox, right? Or you park in front of the fire hydrant. Or here's another one: you park in a handicap spot.
Oh.
My mom spent the last part of her life handicapped. You park in front of a handicap spot, I don't care if you're giving it away. I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you're able-bodied. You can't walk an extra few feet. You're taking some person who's maybe handicapped in a wheelchair. You're taking their spot because you don't want to walk. I mean, these basic fundamental things, Bob, that people do, that I'd love your thoughts on what not to do, just to be always have that zone thinking, radar up, so you don't do the things to lose the sale before you even get to try to make the sale.
Well, the same exercise that I mentioned you can use to learn from your role models is really the same tool that you can use to kind of step in the shoes of your client and see the world from their point of view. I mean, one of my favorite not to do is to park in front of the actual garbage that's on the curb that the garbage truck is going to come by and get, right? I mean, and they will go behind the car and get it, but I mean, I'm even thoughtful to them in that context. But you will pick up these cues from people when you're meeting with them. I mean, and this is about your zone. I mean, when you're in that zone, you walk in and immediately whether they're in the zone or not too. And you can tell by your actions if they're not pleased with you or they're not, they're certainly not going to buy if they're in that current state of mind. Well, there's a couple of things going on here. One is that your mirror neurons are picking up where they're at. And if you don't have the resilience to respond to that and treat it as just nice, gentle feedback and go to your zone, then they're going to get stuck where you are. You're going to get stuck where they are. And if you can imagine this downward spiral where you're affecting them and they're affecting you, someone has to be the mature person in the room or the professional salesperson and stop that from happening. And one of the I think the more brilliant strategies in the book allows you to do that. It gives you the ability, like I said, to just stand back and go, oh, boy, I better stop this decline or I might as well just leave right now. And so then you have the tools to take leadership at that sales meeting and get that person feeling better about themselves so that they feel better about you and better about the product.
Now, how does habit of influence help that process?
That's a really tricky subject for most people because it never quits. Okay. If you're walking into a business meeting, if you're not being influential, you're being a fly on the wall. If you're not walking into a meeting with a potential client, if you're not influential, you're being, why you're there? Why are you there? So this extends not only to sales, but it's funny. I mean, it's not funny, but my wife and I, when we're talking about going out socially, what's our outcome tonight? How are we going to be? Are we going to be influential in a sense? Not outrageous. We're not going to be dancing on tables or anything, but just influential. Or are we going to be part of the problem and get caught up in other people's misery, which sometimes happens, right? If you've heard it. I got this problem. I got this problem. I got this problem. Oh, business sucks, or all that kind of stuff. I mean, when you see yourself as having the potential of influencing everyone, you never get caught off guard in those situations because you're always going in with an outcome. You're always going with the notion that someone's got to be leader here. Why not let it be me? Why don't I take the leadership here? I have I mentioned in the book, one of my clients was doing maintenance for a huge mining company. His crews would go in and service all these vehicles. Had 19 different crews going to different mining operations, and he had one company where he would sit down with them and plan out the contract with them, and he got into a situation where the different members of the company's team were actually discussing and kind of getting in a heated discussion about what that contract would look like. And he's sort of sitting there kind of going, hey, I need to be more of the focus here. Why don't you guys got your act together beforehand? And he said, hey, wait a minute, guys. Is it okay if I chair this meeting? He's getting a contract from this company, and he's chairing the meeting in order to get them to organize how they're going to pay him and what they're going to pay him for.
That's leadership.
That's leadership. That's influence.
I love that story, by the way, because yeah, exactly. It's got to be an adult in the room. Got to be believe me, got my own share of stories with that, which I'm sure you do too. Now let's talk about somebody who knew something about leadership also, Mr. Disney. Begin by doing was another statement that you used to start a chapter. Begin by doing.
Yeah. I mean, someone has to take action. Someone has to initiate it. And if you're, again, that wallflower, or you don't want to be seen for fear of making mistakes, and want to let somebody else to do it, well, it's never going to get done. You're never going to learn from making mistakes, right? So this is about learning how to take action, learning what that action even looks like. How do you design that? How do you engineer what you're going to do on that given day and plan your day? And part of that is just having the energy to do it. So in my book, I talk a lot about that in terms of utilizing that energy within you. We often call it adrenaline, and call it whatever you like, but it creates momentum in your day. You manage it accurately. You build it to challenge yourself. I mean, you don't need to be fully wired when you're filling out reports and whatever, but that phone rings. If you're not rising to the occasion instantly, it can't be, do I have to take another call? Or, you see who it is and you go, oh, not that guy again. If that's you, then you better do something about that. You better find out how to get your zone, how to deal with difficult people, how to build build that do it attitude. And it is, Nike has that, I don't want to advertise for Nike here, but, just do it. Sometimes that doesn't work. Right. I had owner of a hockey team, and for whatever reason, I just got nervous. I was meeting with him, and I just got nervous, but I just do it, Bob. And I went in and I totally screwed up. I mean, I learned from it. I learned a lot from it, but I screwed up, and I went, so that doesn't work. Just doing it. So what do I have to do differently? How can I craft this? How can I work on that outcome piece I talk about, and figure out what I have to do differently, and so that I feel that inner joy and feel that excitement for going in, so that he'll feel my excitement, not feel my nervousness.
Exactly.
And I think Disney exemplifies that. What he just did everything, right? He was at a time when everything was probably exciting for him, right? This new animation, holy smokes! I mean, it was just, and it hasn't stopped. It's continually going with AI, right? That whole animation process.
It's just what would Walt Disney do with AI? Oh, put that brain with AI. Wow, who knows? Well, who knows? Hey, listen, mate, he's cryogenic, so you never know. He might be back at some point. But I was thinking when I read your book the other day, I thought of that for a minute. I said, what would Walt Disney do with today's technology? It would be downright scary what he could do. And if you put him with Elon Musk, could you imagine those guys in a room figuring out what to do? I mean, we'd all be like flying to the moon for coffee or something. I mean, who knows what these guys would come up with here.
But even posing that question, which I really like what you did there. What would Disney do today with AI? And think about it. I mean, you've probably seen old videos of Walt, and in a sense, you stepped in his shoes and said, "Hey,
yeah."
And who knows? You go home and wake up in the middle of the night and go, "That's what he did."
Who knows?
These ideas, that's where ideas come from.
Hopefully my son will figure it out, be the next Disney or whatever. But it brings up a great point too, just as a segue, before I get to kind of my last kind of summary question for you here. Okay. To your point about the hockey owner, because I've done the same thing, where my preparation wasn't right. I think about the athletes, right? Because you and I love sports so much and we talk about sports, but I think of Tom Brady, right? And I think about the fact that Brady supposedly, I don't know, I never met the man, but supposedly he was a master of preparation. There were certain things he would not let the team trainer touch, the black for his eyes, for example, his socks, his game socks. There were other parts of his uniform that was like, those were off limits. He was personally going to prepare those parts of his physiology for a game and speak for the results. I imagine, I don't know Patrick Mahomes either, but I imagine Patrick Mahomes is probably along the same line where these guys become master in preparation. Okay, great. Those are two huge examples, two super wealthy guys. How about just us little salespeople that are out there knocking on doors for a living, trying to make a living? We've got to prepare with that same level of intensity, where if you had seen that hockey guy and you had spent 3 days Googling everything you could about him and maybe his team, his players, his rink, his wife, his dog, his cat, and went in with a couple of things where you knew a little bit about him. And I've done the same thing where I've walked in and I said, this is a really interesting person. I know nothing about them. And I'm embarrassed because I should. At the very least, I should have made a phone call to say, somebody knows this guy. Tell me about him. Right.
Yeah.
And that preparation, I'd love your thoughts about that, because as salespeople, this is something, once again, that the Mehdi Fakazadis, the Tom McGarrels that I referenced in that insurance thing, some of the people you've worked with that are elite professionally, right? The guy with the 19 trucks, for example, right? That took control of that room, said, hey, if I don't take control of it, I'm walking out without a deal. So I'm taking control of it for my benefit and my employees' benefit and my wife and my kids' benefit, because if I don't, these guys aren't going to get their act together. Somebody needs to be the adult in the room. And they probably appreciated it, probably resented it on one hand. On the other hand, they probably said, hey, we got something done today. We showed up for work and we walked out with a result rather than with more questions than answers. So people do appreciate that leadership sometimes when we're marketing to them or selling to them, that we take the lead and just say, hey, here's what you need to do. So thoughts on that, Bob, preparedness in the sales process?
Well, I work a lot one-on-one with clients. And, some clients, I don't usually take on a client before 9 o'clock in the morning. And some people look at me and go, well, Bob, I'm up at 5. Well, you know, you can't start till 9. Well, I tell them, what you don't see is my preparation in the morning. I have to be up an hour and a half before any client I see, preparing for that client. Now, am I studiously looking at their notes, whatever? No, I've done that the night before. I'm building my zone. So when that screen, I work total online around the world. This is my international headquarters right here. But when that screen, they come up on the screen, bingo, they're it. I don't lose them for an hour. 5 minutes later, in their mind, they're done. They go, you mean the hour's up now? And how did I do that? Kind of magically? It wasn't magic. It was preparation, and experience. Granted, I've got 30 years of experience doing this, but it's taught me some valuable lessons, and that is be ready, be physically ready, look neat, be aware of your appearance, and try to closely as possible get to mirror what you're going to be facing in terms of your clientele. But that readiness and research. My partner and wife loves to research. So she does that side of it. She gets me all the nuts and bolts of what I need to know in that meeting. And then I do the preparation. I add my skill to it, and I'm ready to go. And when I talk again about adrenaline in the book, but when I work with anybody, with athletes, whatever, there's no you don't want to have any ups and downs in your process, right? You need to hit that meeting running, and you need to be so in the zone and so wired to go that no objection is going to throw you off kilter, right? And most of us have had some kind of sports or arts experience where we play late into the night, and we go home and we shower or whatever and go to bed, and we're wired. We're still wired, and we're going, when is this adrenaline going to leave us? And maybe 3 hours later, you kind of drift into a sleep. Well, if you can imagine that 3 hours of adrenaline that you had to drain away, I want my clients to take that 3 hours and put it before the meeting, so that you're so wired in adrenaline that you get to that meeting. You've already done the meeting. You've seen it successful. You're just ready to rock and roll.
Exactly. And to that point, you look like you know what you're doing.
And you look like you know what you're doing.
Like even if you walk out there and go, when I've done it, you've done it too. Everybody that here has ever been successful in any endeavor, you've all done it, right? When we walked out there and said, wow, that really went well. And you're thinking, oh, man, I didn't think that was going to go well at all. And it went incredibly well, So let's talk about one other thing here, Bob. Okay. And that's passion trumps skill. And let me open with just my thoughts on that. And you carry it home from here, but passion trumps skill. I was talking to one of the executives in my company yesterday, and I said to her, it's Mary. I said, Mary, I've seen people, two types of people I've majored in my career in network marketing. This is one are single mothers. I've helped a lot of single mothers that have become incredibly successful. One of which, by the way, unfortunately, she's deceased. Okay, but her son is now my attorney, and he's one of the top attorneys in Los Angeles. By the way, he sued Wynn Entertainment Company and won a $65 million judgment a couple of years ago. He's high level, and I knew him since he was a little boy. and he's not my attorney, but his mom was one of my very good friends. She was a single mom. He was a little boy when I met her. And I have stories like that galore of single moms. For some reason, I married a single mom. In my case, that was after the fact, but I did really well with single moms. And secondly, immigrants. I've had so many immigrant stories, people who come from other countries and cultures that have become successful in network marketing beyond the stretch of the imagination. And then I say the average American or Canadian that's born here, speaks the language, doesn't have any obstacles, has millions of people to talk to and say, well, I'm not successful. I'm not doing well. I'm thinking, but this guy over here, he just got off the boat and he's making six figures and you can't get out of your own way and he can barely speak the language, but he speaks the language well enough with the people he speaks the language to that the passion trumps the skill. You might have the skill. You might be the suede shoed salesman that can stand in front of the room that resonates and everybody goes, wow, the guy's really good. And then all of a sudden the guy tripping over his words is the guy that's making 5 times the income. Why is that? And I've looked at that. I've looked at that at many different levels, both of those groups of people, single moms, some of which, by the way, are immigrants or were immigrants when I worked with them, and immigrants, okay, that have become incredibly successful. And I'm like, you know what? And when I read that the other day, Sunday afternoon, and I said, Bob hit a home run on that terminology, passion trumps skill. Because the skills can be taught and acquired by anybody, the single mom, the immigrant, the Canadian or American that's born here, went to school here, knows everybody in town, that isn't successful. And by the way, some of those people are successful, obviously. So I'm not making light of it. But sometimes we're our own worst enemy because we take everything for granted and we make excuses. And it seems like the single mom doesn't make excuses because she's busy raising her kids. And the immigrant doesn't make excuses because they're figuring the world's against them to begin with, and I don't have a chance, so I'm just going to go out and work my tail off and make something happen to the best of my God-given ability, and they work like a dog to do it. Talk about that. Passion trumps skill.
I see it all the time in leadership. And I think one of the biggest examples is an individual I worked with, and at the CEO level, and we worked together to get him the job, and it's a national sports body, and he just ran with it. He ran with the passion. He got the position, and I said, okay, you've got a pretty good organization, but I've looked at all your disciplines, the various Olympic disciplines, and out of the 5, one's quasi in the zone. And I said, your job over the next 6 months or so is to get, I mean, he's not even working with those athletes, but is to take your passion and have it translate down through your managers or directors to your managers, to the coaches, to the athletes. That's all I said. And I'll check in. So 6 months later, I checked in. I said, is it okay for me to take a look at your athletes to see if they're in the zone or not? Because they had the whole new bunch of photos of the teams. He said, no, not quite yet. So I did it anyways. Out of the 5 disciplines, 4 were just massively in the zone. And the other one wasn't. So I called him up and I kind of apologized for, not listening to him. And I explained what I found. And he said, yeah, we're in the process of firing that coach. Mm. And now every once in a while I'll go check out. And by the way, that organization was the best in the world at the Olympics. Wow. In that discipline.
Interesting.
And they're not a big country. They're compared to countries the size of the U.S. and they beat them all. Mm. And that's where his passion and his influence and just, it wasn't trickle down. It created, if you will, an umbrella over the whole organization and lifted them up.
Interesting. I think about that. So let's talk sports for a second. When we watch the Olympics and we watch some of the sports, okay, I don't know who you're referring to, by the way. So folks, don't ask me because Bob can't disclose all his clients for obvious reasons. But I think like with the Dutch figure skaters, for example, or the Swedish cross country ski teams. Small countries. These are, 6, 7, 8 million people countries, and they beat us. They beat you guys. They beat the Russians. The big countries that also have, ice and Nordic sports. And you go, how do these guys do it? And then to your point, right? You look at who runs the organizations. Very, very passionate people. And there's an expectation that they're going to do well at the Olympics.
Yep.
They better do well. If they don't do well, they'll be like that coach, right? They won't be there the next time, right? But I think about that, and I think that goes over once again to business. How many times do we see a small business that becomes a moderate-sized business that eventually becomes a big business in the community, and maybe you don't even know who's running it, and then you go in and you find out, oh, the people running it, the guy or the gal or the couple running it, how dedicated they are. They're here at 5 a.m. They go home at 10 o'clock at night. There are no weekends.
And the service is impeccable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You walk out of there and go, finally, I was treated like a king. I mean, it wasn't that difficult to do.
Well, I'm not saying that this is a good philosophy or not of life, but I know Elon Musk believes in the philosophy of no days off. That every day you don't work, you lose a day. Okay. But maybe you don't lose a day, you lose an opportunity. And, so if the world's richest guy thinks that way, how do we not think that way in small business or small sales or small network marketing? Why do we not have that same level of passion that a guy at that level has?
There is also the metaphor of the guy who's, in competition and wood cutting, and one guy doesn't quit, and the other guy takes 15 minutes off every hour. And the other guy says to him, I mean, how could you still beat me taking 15 minutes off every hour? And I slaved, I worked all the way through. And the guy kind of just sighs and says, well, you have to take a few minutes to sharpen your axe. Okay. And that's where I think in when you have balance, you have the weekend is balance. And if you run your business properly and you have, you set it up in a way where you leave an indelible impression on the people who are working for you. They carry on your tradition on the weekend if that's what if your business is a 7-day business.
Well, you go back to Dick Vermeil when he was coaching the Eagles. He was a 7-day-a-week coach, and he burnt out. I remember he wasn't that old. I mean, I think he was in his 40s, and it was like nothing left. Like he was like an exploded volcano is the terminology that they use for guys like that. There just was nothing left of the guy. Now he did come back and win a Super Bowl with St. Louis a number of years later, but I think he probably grew as a person. So I'm not saying that that's healthy,
right?
No days off. I guess what it comes down to is that when you're passionate about something, you're never looking at the clock and going, well, it's 5 o'clock or it's Friday afternoon. It's like, well, yeah, but there's work to be done. Now, if it's your wife's birthday or your kid's little league game, well, you need to be there because that's a priority too. But I think it's that thinking that the passion is more important than the clock or the day or the calendar, I think is what we're coming to.
Yeah. It's I think once you find your zone in mind versus sales, you're going to understand better what it means to be passionate. Some people don't even know. And just to feel passionate about something and then be able to go, that's what Bob means. I feel it. Let's apply it to sales. Let's apply to the community work I do. Let's apply it. Let's be in that. I mean, this is a real big one. You've got a son. You keep saying how well he's done with my program. I give most of that credit to you, John. As you well know, you started walking around in the zone and influencing your son in huge ways, and your daughter, and your wife, and your community.
I have a note hanging on my bulletin board here from my son that says the number one thing that he admires about me was my tenacity. And it's hanging here. I'm looking at it. And it's half hanging off the wall. It's got a rip in it, believe it or not. But to your point, Bob, because of the zone and the tenacity, it was that consistency of not only staying on him, but guiding him. When he decided, hey, you know what? I'm not going to make it as a hockey player. I've been concussed 4 times. I love the sport, but I'm not willing to do the work anymore, and I don't want to get hurt anymore. And he was going to be a shot blocker in college. Basically, the coach was like, you're going to block shots. And he said, Coach, I've had 4 concussions. And the coach was like, well, I don't care. And he came back to me and he said, Dad, I want to be an electrical engineer. I'm going to need my brain. The jock in me, well, of course you go block the shots. The dad in me was like, wait a minute, when you're 40, you shouldn't be sitting in a dark room because you can't think straight. And maybe you're going to have a family, and maybe you're not going to have a family, but there's other things in life. And boy, that was a tough time. But the zone is what got us through, because what I knew from what you had taught us and worked with us on was, hey, next step. Next step is that this step didn't go the way that he wanted it to go, or I wanted it to go, right? Every dad's got the same ambition for your kid. If he's a hockey player, football player, every kid's going to be Tom Brady. Every kid's going to be the guy that just signed with the Mets for $750 million, Juan Soto. Every kid's going to be Wayne Gretzky. Well, Wayne Gretzky's poor compared to those guys. So he's going to be the kid that's playing with Edmonton. He's making a lot of money. They're going to be LeBron James. Well, reality is, you're not even talking this. You're talking a fraction of this. So, and the reality is, even for those guys, we know those guys' names. There were guys that were probably better than them that got hurt, lost interest, lost focus. But what did they do next? Okay. And that's what the zone, I believe, Bob, and what you teach is what you teach, and what Mind versus Sales is teaching, okay, is that process of what's next. Because life goes on. Because you're 20 years old and your sports career is done at a certain level doesn't mean that there's not a pivot to that next thing. Freddie's case, electrical engineering, other kids' cases, other things. And if you don't have that, it's very, very dangerous. Yeah. Very, very dangerous, because then, you just become, you have no direction.
Yeah. You learn a process, you learn a system, and you can take that model and apply it to your sport, apply it to school, apply it to business, apply it to sales. And it's how we think, it's how we do high performance, and it's actually fun.
It is. It is. So, Bob, you mentioned earlier you got a book you're working on for those young people we just talked about.
Yes.
What are we looking at time-wise?
It's going out now to young readers to get some feedback from them, and we're looking early in the new year.
Okay.
It's a unique look at high performance. It stays with the idea of a system, but it puts it in the terminology of a young person. It gets them thinking, every young person is on their cell phone. They know how it works. They know how it's got an operating system. They know how to install apps. So I've taken the high performance model and treated it like a cell phone, where you have an operating system and you have a whole bunch of these apps. that allow you to deal with difficult people, deal with a difficult coach, deal with, learn fast, manage your adrenaline.
Love it. But next generation, it is funny at the ages that we now are both at, which we talked about earlier, because we're not spring chickens anymore, as they say.
And we're like, yeah, no,
It's so important that we continue the right influences for that next generation, because the leadership skills aren't out there the way that they once were. We had leaders like John Kennedy. We had leaders like Dwight Eisenhower. What do we have now? We don't. And so the stuff that we learned from leadership in business, leadership in athletics, leadership in boardrooms,
Yep.
it's so important that next generation gets that somewhere, that voice that says, this is the way to do it. Very incredibly important what you're doing with that.
thank you. Yeah. I'll get you a copy.
Well, I bet you will. So here's what we're going to do. Okay. So, Bob, let me turn the recording off. Okay. And then I'll see if I can find my son so you can tell him about this yourself. Okay. Can Karen wait 10 more minutes for dinner?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Solleder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.